On a cold December morning in the year 2000, someone rang the doorbell at 43 Narodnoy Voli Street in the city of Yekaterinburg, but the owners were in no hurry to open the door. They were caught off guard by the early guests. The doorbell rang repeatedly. Finally, footsteps were heard behind the door and a sleepy man in underwear and a t-shirt appeared on the threshold. "What do you want?" Nikolai Nekrasov asked in a displeased voice. "We need to talk seriously. Let's go outside." The uninvited guest, well dressed and tall, had a direct, determined gaze. He was clearly a serious man, not a joker. "I'll get dressed now and we'll go talk." It seemed that the offer didn't bother the owner of the apartment at all. After leaving the entrance, they got into a car parked nearby. A few minutes later, a shot rang out from the car. It was he who decided the fate of an entire gang of hardened criminals who had terrorized 2 regions with their daring and bloody crimes. Today, we will talk about the fatal shot and the capture of the members of Farid's gang. 1995. Former officer, now a police officer of the Tyumen City Police Department, Sergei Fomintsev was sitting at a table in a half-empty cafe, nervously drumming his fingers on the table. He noticed the long-awaited visitor, who entered unhurriedly through the door. He came after all, he thought. A stylishly dressed man with a sharp black beard and piercing brown eyes approached his table and sat down across from him. "Hey there, boss," he said quietly. "What did you want to talk about?" Sergei looked at him attentively and, without hurrying, lit a cigarette. He knew a lot about Farid Davlyatchin. He was a respected criminal in the underworld. A trail of all sorts of offenses had followed him since as far back as 1988. Robberies, racketeering and car theft were the least serious of them. Sergei carefully studied all the case materials on Farid before the meeting. "Listen, Farid, I suggest you cooperate." Sergei paused, looking intently into the thief's eyes. "But not with the investigation, with me personally." Farid gave a crooked smile, but he didn't look away. "Do you want to make that much tea out of me? Is that why you called me for a serious conversation?" Farid lived by the thieves' code and would never try to curry favor with the cops. Both the thieves and the police knew about this. Sergei lowered his voice, referring to a different kind of cooperation. "You've heard about the Department for Combating Economic Crimes, haven't you?" "Well, I've heard of it. So what?" Farid frowned and looked at him skeptically. "I work there, and I'll be straight with you. I know a lot of companies and owners who deal in counterfeit goods and don't pay taxes, so they've got plenty of money. I know about the warehouses with goods, and not all of them are legal. Schedules for company cash collections, routes and delivery times for cargo by trucks to different organizations. I know how to get a police uniform and weapons. That's my contribution, and from you I need reliable, experienced people who can take all this and use it." Farid listened without interrupting. It seems like Mentu got tired of his meager salary and decided to play a profitable game. From his buddies, he heard that Fomintsev wasn't exactly clean-handed, and he could be trusted. This is definitely not a setup. They agreed to divide all the responsibilities among the members of the future organized crime group. Sergei, a former military man, was able to supply the gangsters with weapons and ammunition. Decommissioned police uniforms and radios also supplemented the arsenal of Farid's gang, not without his help. Thanks to strict discipline and careful secrecy, having a considerable
stockpile of weapons,
the organized crime group began to resemble a military unit. It had a clear hierarchy, where everyone knew their duties. For the slightest violation of the rules, there was a harsh punishment. At the end of 1995, an armored cash-in-transit vehicle heading to Roshchino airport with a large sum of cash was stopped by traffic police officers on a deserted stretch of road. Special-purpose mobile unit officers in uniform with automatic rifles stood next to the vehicle. The cash couriers thought something must have happened. The driver opened the door, and the traffic inspector and 2 special-purpose mobile unit officers quickly approached the vehicle. According to the rules, one of the cash couriers wanted to report the forced stop over the radio, but he didn't have time. The approaching traffic police officer pulled out a Tokarev pistol and shot him in the
head. Drivers?
The third partner was shot almost point blank because of the machine guns. After firing control shots to the head, the bandits started gathering the loot. After taking the money, the criminals fled the scene. The airport administration raised the alarm. Only half an hour later, the arriving officers discovered the armored cash-in-transit vehicle with bullet marks and 2 bodies inside. The third one miraculously survived. The wounds through the bulletproof vest were not fatal, and the finishing shot to the head went through his face and out the other side. In critical condition, he was taken to the regional hospital, where the doctors did everything possible to save the armored car guard. He reported the bandits disguised as police officers.
Uniform. Detain.
They couldn't catch them hot on the trail. Sergei Fomintsev understood that now the cash couriers would increase security, and he talked Farid out of repeated attacks. They turned their attention to freight transportation. In the spring of 1996, trucks carrying goods for commercial companies began to disappear on the Tyumen-Kurgan highway. On April 27th, under unclear circumstances, a truck loaded with cigarettes disappeared. It was driven by an experienced long-haul driver, Sergei Viktorov. His body will be found with gunshot wounds in a ditch. A day later, on May 11th, a large truck carrying food products and alcohol will mysteriously disappear. Drivers Kuzminchuk and Pelik were found shot with automatic weapons in a forest belt near the road. There was no doubt that a well-armed gang of robbers was operating on the highway. A state automobile, inspectorate patrol car and police uniforms do not arouse suspicion among the stopped drivers. And then, the attacker's calling card becomes the obligatory control shot. They left no witnesses. In total, the investigation uncovered 11 disappearances of large trucks and 13 bodies. All the stolen goods were sold to trusted businessmen at half price and distributed to stores all over Russia. That's why it was impossible to trace the stolen goods. Rumors about the brutal attacks quickly spread among the truck drivers. 2 regions sent their best officers to catch the bandits. Decoy trucks with a squad of special forces inside patrolled the highway. But either the bandits decided that the money from the stolen goods they sold would last them for a long time, or someone warned them about the measures being taken. But at the end of the summer of 1996, the attacks stopped. However, the organized crime group persisted by changing their line of work. In the fall of that same year, in the evening, people in camouflage burst into the building of AOOT Tyumen Elektrospekstroj. After shooting the guard with a Tokarev pistol and finishing him off with a shot to the head, they broke into the office with the cash register.
Enterprise. The loot
was more than 3 million rubles, which converted to modern money is about 30 million. Not stopping there, the bandits went into the hangar
of the Enterprise where,
after shooting the guard and his replacement, they stole 3 water motorcycles and other equipment. They took him away in a Gazelle van stolen from the same Enterprise. A week later, the administrative building of the Gyanja base was robbed. There in Tyumen, the bandits shot the security guard right at the checkpoint. They took goods worth 4.5 million rubles from the warehouse. The warehouseman, who didn't have time to hide, was forced to his knees and shot in the back of the head. And again, the same handwriting. There were no living witnesses for the investigation. The operatives of the Tyumen City Police Department couldn't find any trace of the gang. The stolen goods were sold through channels unknown to the investigation, most likely not even in the Tyumen region. The criminals didn't leave any fingerprints, just like they didn't leave any living witnesses who could identify them. But what was most alarming was the criminals' astonishing awareness of upcoming investigative operations and police ambushes, as if they knew about them in advance. And what was astonishing was that the attacks happened exactly when the enterprises had large amounts of cash on hand and when large shipments of goods had just arrived at the warehouses. The gang prepared a transportation in advance to carry away the stolen goods. It was as if someone was sharing information, directing them to their targets. In October 1998, the warehouse of Joint Stock Company of Labor Collectives Diazal, the only supplier in Tyumen of radio stations, telephones and other electronics for government agencies, including the Ministry of Internal Affairs, was robbed. Now, the bandits could freely listen to police communications and leave the crime scene in time. They could also coordinate their actions better during raids. The Ministry of Internal Affairs understood this well, but could do nothing about it. Meanwhile, Farid's gang's raids were becoming more and more brazen. In February of 1999, the Monroe store was robbed. The criminals' loot consisted of office equipment and components worth 600,000 rubles. The night watchman was very lucky then. They didn't take his life. He didn't see the attackers' faces. They were wearing balaclavas. Having miraculously survived, he couldn't tell anything about their distinguishing features. Even if he could, he wouldn't have said anything. At that time, all of Tyumen already knew about the gang led by someone named Farid and about how brutally they dealt with witnesses. The fear of death silenced people no worse than a gag. The organized crime group continued its raids. In May, the bandits broke into limited liability company Max's warehouse by dismantling the brick wall. The loot was substantial, a cigarette shipment worth nearly 500,000 rubles. In September, the criminals took the cash register of the holding company El Dorado, making off with more than 1.5 million. That same month, the gang in masks burst into the newly opened Figaro store, tying up the female security guard. They took away fur coats, jackets and overcoats worth 2 million rubles. They carefully carried out the clothes along with the hangers so that they wouldn't lose their commercial appearance. The investigation into the elusive gang couldn't keep up with adding new crime episodes to the map. In the office of the head of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, new flags marking the locations of robberies and armed attacks were added every month. At the country resort, where members of the organized crime group were celebrating another successful job, a serious conversation took place. "Farid, there's a problem," said Sergey, gesturing for Farid to step into a room where no one from the noisy, slightly drunk company could overhear them. They entered the room, shut the door firmly, and sat on a leather sofa. A bottle of cognac and a fruit vase were on the table. "Farid, my colleagues are starting an investigation into the information leak from the Economic Crimes Department." Sergey Farid started quietly, took a sip and looked at him skeptically. "What, you haven't bought off all the cops yet?" His eyes narrowed. A sly smile flashed across his face, revealing strong white teeth. "You can't buy these ones. They're from security service to security service, which investigates violations in the work of law enforcement agencies. They can grab any general by the balls for their sins, and no one can tell them what to do. What do you think we should do?" Farid turned serious, his fingers fidgeting nervously with grapes. "Until everything settles down, I can't leak any information. Otherwise, they'll grab me by the collar and throw me in jail." Sergey gave a grim smile, but immediately turned his gaze to Farid and continued in a firm voice. "The investigation found a businessman selling our fur coats at the market with store tags still attached. Fearing consequences, he revealed the source of the goods." Farid's fingers clenched into a fist and juice from the berries dripped onto the expensive upholstery of the sofa. "Well, that bastard, tomorrow I'll send the guys to him. He'll be full of holes like a sieve. Deal with him however you want, but later. While the cops are looking for you, you need to lay low. Take care of him quietly. Since your Kolyan was working, he needs to be taken out too." The next day, Sergey suggested that Farid temporarily move to the neighboring Sverdlovsk region. Sergey had reliable contacts there. They prepared for the move quickly. After gathering everything they needed, the gang quickly left Tyumen region in 6 cars. In Yekaterinburg, Sergey had already rented several apartments through acquaintances. The gang members who stayed behind at home quickly scattered to remote places where it would be hard to find them. Farid didn't like sitting around doing nothing, and a wave of daring robberies swept over Yekaterinburg. In the summer of 2002, the bandits broke into the OOO base. The security guards put up resistance, but there were more attackers. Moreover, the guards, armed with IJ-71 pistols using low-powered cartridges, could not stop the robbers who were wearing bulletproof vests and armed with automatic weapons. In the shootout, 3 private security guards were killed, but 2 of Farid's men also received minor injuries. After breaking into the warehouse, the leader told them to load the goods-filled boxes into the MAZ truck waiting nearby. And then, over the radio, he was informed that another truck with goods was heading to the base. The criminals waited until the truck drove through the gate and parked by the warehouse. The driver didn't suspect anything was wrong when the gate was opened for him not by the security guards, but by people in camouflage and balaclavas. Maybe that's just the new uniform now, he thought. But instead of greeting him, the guards dragged him out of the cab, knocked him out with a rifle butt, tied him up and threw him into the basement. That day, the gang seized goods worth almost 6 million rubles and claimed their first victim in a new location. They decided to sell the stolen goods in the Tyumen region. The invoices were genuine, and the buyers of the goods were experienced, trustworthy businessmen. Inspired by their successful robbery, the Faridovsi, just a month later, stole a cash register with 500,000 rubles from the Rostov warehouse. For some unknown reason, they didn't kill the elderly guard. They just scared him with a weapon and tied him up. In the fall of 2002, driving through the large village of Nizhnaya Tavda in the Sverdlovsk region, Farid, as usual, was looking out for stores and warehouses located away from residential areas.
Sector.
Suddenly, he saw the building of the settlement and cash center, standing surrounded by private houses. It flashed through his mind, that's where there's an endless amount of money. He stopped, got out of the car and began to examine the future crime scene, noting that one of the houses was only 15 meters away from the settlement and cash center. He entered the yard and knocked. A grey-haired man of about 70, wearing a sheepskin coat over his bare body and old quilted pants, opened the door. He smelled of alcohol and tobacco. "Hey there, old man," Farid started the conversation as boldly as always. "Hey yourself, what do you want?" The old man looked suspiciously from Farid to the red Lada parked by the gate. At that time, a car like that clearly indicated the owner's involvement in criminal activities. "I want to buy your house. How much?" Farid asked bluntly. "What house? You. It's clear you're not from around here. I've lived in it since I was born, and I'll die in it too. Go back to where you came from." Only now did Farid notice that the old man was gripping a short, sharpened axe in his hand until it gleamed. "If you don't want to, then don't," the bandit muttered through his teeth, and turning around, quickly walked toward the gate. Farid noticed the armed guards as soon as he entered the regional command center. After lingering a bit by the stands with advertisements and announcements, he asked the cashier something, joked, laughed, and satisfied with the information he received, went out to the street. The old man turned out to be friendly, but he lives alone and has no relatives. Farid lit a cigarette, his eyes gazing into the distance, over the roofs of old, dilapidated houses. He thought after the shootout at the base, he really didn't want to risk people's lives anymore, and in a small village, the police station was just a stone's throw away. 3 armed guards and about a dozen police officers. You could lose all your men and still never see the money. He needed a different plan, and that's when he realized what he had to do. Quickly running down the steps, he dropped into the seat, the engine roared to life, and the Zhiguli shot off, racing toward Yekaterinburg. The fire in the old wooden house in the village of Nizhnaya Tavda broke out on the night of September 5th, the year 2002. The firefighters arrived late to the nearly burned down house, unsurprising the local residents. The old man often went to parties, and when he drank, he smoked a lot. He didn't have any relatives. So, when several strong young men appeared at the scene of the fire, arriving in a red Volgsky Avtomobilny Zavod 2109 and telling the neighbors that they had bought the house a week ago, no one suspected anything. Work began to bustle. Boards were brought in, and the men with shovels started clearing the remains of the house and digging the ground. The locals thought they must have decided to build and walked by on their own business. Work was bustling day and night, and after 2 months, the tunnel calculated to reach the cash center was almost ready. Lined inside with wooden planks, it was only 1.5 meters away from the regional command center basement. Farid rubbed his hands together contentedly. All that was left was to wait for the money to arrive, and that very night they would finish the job they had spent so much time and effort on. However, as usual, His Majesty made the final decision. Vasya, the local alcoholic, was wandering around the settlement on the evening of October 21st, hoping to get another portion of alcohol. Passing by the regional command center, he noticed that today no one was working at the site of the burned down house. Deciding to make some profit from the construction tools and later exchange them for a bottle, he looked around and climbed onto the mound of earth, then carefully started to descend into the pit. He didn't find anything outside, and seeing an entrance underground, he decided to go down. "Holy Mother, they've dug a whole tunnel here," he exclaimed in surprise after walking all the way to the end. "I should tell the local police, otherwise, who knows, they might crawl into the cash register and then my pension will be gone," he thought. And Vaska rushed to the police station, not forgetting to grab a couple of sturdy, almost new shovels, planning to later trade them to old lady Agafya for a bottle of moonshine. The next day, while reading the morning newspaper, Farid cursed desperately while his accomplices stared gloomily at the floor, scratching their shaved heads. All their many days of hard work had been in vain. In an article about the village of Nizhnaya Tavda, some journalist, in vivid detail and verse, described the crimes prevented by the police and included an interview with the local hero who had discovered the tunnel. Photo fits of the suspected fraudsters were carefully attached to the article. At the bottom, "God damn it," the boss shouted in anger. "I'll find that drunk and bury him alive in our den." "We need to get out of here. Now everyone in the city will know our faces," said Nikolai Nekrasov quietly. For resourcefulness and unquestioning obedience, he became Farid's right-hand man, and he was also a sharpshooter, firing pistols with both hands, which earned him the nickname Al Capone. The gang respected him, and Farid always kept him close and included him in the most secret plans. Farid looked at him with bloodshot eyes, glared angrily, but realizing there was no other way out, collapsed powerlessly onto the couch, covering his face with his hand. He, having calmed down a little, gave the order to get ready. Farid's brigade was returning to their native Tyumen. Dialing Sergei Fomin's number from memory, Farid patiently waited for an answer. "Hello, my dear. Finally, he heard a familiar voice on the phone. "I'm aware, Palef. I'll be waiting at our spot at 20. Farid nodded to Nikolai Nekrasov, and as he started the car, he quietly asked, "Did you set up the meeting?" "Yes. If the cops were following him, he would have said I got the wrong number, so everything's fine." In a small cafe, 3 people were sitting at the table by the window. Sergei understood perfectly well that it was better not to show up in the Sverdlovsk region for now. Descriptions of the bandits are now in every police department, and a real manhunt will begin for them. And everything had just settled down for him, the inspection was over, and they couldn't make any claims against him. Get ready, guys, there are a lot of big cases. And yes, he looked closely at his accomplices, his eyes narrowed. Don't forget about Yekaterinburg, there's still a lot of work to be done there. Let the local businessmen save up some money, and soon the cops will put your case on the cold case shelf in the archives. I'll keep it under control. No matter what you say, without Sergei's help, Farid's gang would have been gone a long time ago. Tyumen is restless again. Robberies of buses, stores, and wealthy Tyumen residents' apartments were occurring in quick succession, carried out by the UPG. At one of these places, the Faridovtsi, after tying up and beating the owner, took away 25,000 United States dollars, numerous pieces of jewelry, and more than 100 leather jackets. Over the course of a year, the gang committed 10 attacks and robberies totaling 14 million rubles. The investigators wondered whether a new serious gang had appeared or if Farid's crew had gone back to their old ways, but they still didn't have any direct evidence. The criminals left no evidence behind, coordinated their actions, worked smoothly and quickly, and then disappeared. In early 2003, Farid received information from a reliable source that on January 25th, an armored cash-in-transit vehicle would be transporting a large sum of cash from Tyumen to Erbit, a small town in the Sverdlovsk region. Deciding to repeat the success of 1995, the bandits began thorough preparations. With an interval of 3 days, 2 cars were stolen, a Niva and a VAZ2109. Late in the evening on January 24th, after loading weapons, camouflage clothing, and communication devices into the two cars, the criminals set out for their previously chosen positions. The cash-in-transit guards were supposed to travel early in the morning. A special spiked strip laid out on the road was meant to puncture their tires and force them to stop. And that's when, from an ambush in the roadside bushes, the first group, Viktor Rudnik and Andrei Uzmanov, began shooting at the vehicle. Knowing that the money would be transported in an armored vehicle, Farid had prepared a rocket-propelled grenade 18 Muka in advance. Even tank armor could be penetrated by its shot. So there was no need to even mention a civilian car, even if it was reinforced. The second group was supposed to take the money and eliminate any remaining witnesses. In the village of Kamenka, Tyumen district, the gang planned to lay low with the loot for a while until the search for them cooled down. And they decided to burn the stolen cars somewhere in a remote place. That same night, a patrol car with 2 traffic police inspectors was heading out for duty.
From orbit.
Suddenly, the headlights caught 2 cars standing in the roadside bushes out of the darkness. Commander, Senior Sergeant Alexander Obogrolov recently returned from a deployment in Chechnya. He was awarded the Medal for Courage. He was used to acting decisively and without unnecessary hesitation. It was necessary to check if everything was in order. Stopping the car a few dozen meters from the Niva, he turned on the flashing lights and got out with a flashlight to check.
The passenger's documents.
Suddenly the Niva sped off, pulling onto the highway and rushing toward Tyumen. Pulling out his service pistol, he turned toward the other car. A burst of automatic gunfire rang out and Alexander fell to the ground. The partner who jumped out opened fire on the Davlyatchin but was seriously wounded by return fire. The criminals escaped, not finishing off their victims in their usual way. The best forces were assigned to investigate the death of Inspector Obogrolov. Sergei was no less frustrated by the failures than Farida. You understand that now everyone is after you, both our people and the Federal Security Service. Farid didn't make excuses, although he understood that an accident could have happened anywhere and at any time. I've had enough of these cash couriers. There were no such problems with bases and warehouses. You have other problems now. Sergei moved closer to Farid and looked him in the eyes. Trying to save your own skin. Remember, I told you not to forget about Yekaterinburg. You still have connections there. Take everything you need and leave as soon as possible. And again Yekaterinburg, again the safe houses. Nikolai Nekrasov, loyal to his leader, independently developed a plan to attack the Oboltor wholesale base. In the evening, a truck loaded with coffee was supposed to arrive there for unloading. The bandits wanted, as usual, to neutralize the guards and the driver and steal the goods to Tyumen, where it would be difficult to find them. The operation went off without a hitch. They didn't even have to take anyone's life. The guards were young, inexperienced guys, armed only with non-lethal pistols. After tying up the guards and the driver who was sleeping in the guardhouse, the criminals, following their usual scheme, stole the truck along with the goods. Let the guys go. Let them get some rest, suggested Nikolai Faridou. And we need to discuss one new case without any extra ears around. Satisfied with the successful outcome of the robbery, Farid sent the group to rest until morning, while he and Nikolai went to a rented apartment to celebrate their success. On the way, they stopped by a store to get some drinks and snacks. All night long, they noisily discussed the plan for the upcoming jewelry store robbery and only fell asleep in the early morning. Nikolai didn't hear the doorbell right away. When he woke up, he thought he had imagined it. But then the doorbell rang insistently again. "Who did the devils bring here now?" he muttered. And just as he was in his underwear and t-shirt, he went to open the door. He wasn't expecting the guys this early. God willing, those guys will sleep in until lunchtime. Everything blurred before his eyes, and he looked incredulously at the 5 empty cognac bottles lying in the hallway. We really partied hard, he thought, but then the doorbell loudly reminded him of itself again. Nikolai opened the door and saw an unfamiliar man who invited him to step outside to talk. Nikolai tried to wake up Farid, but he was snoring and didn't even think about waking up. "I'll go alone. Maybe it's from the local dealers. They want to buy the goods," he thought. They had their own clientele built up long ago, who gladly bought stolen goods at half price. But what if it's the cops? The thought flashed through his mind. Just in case, he grabbed his Tokarev pistol and stepped out of the building entrance. A maroon Lada 2109 was parked by the entrance with two men who had just arrived. Nikolai got into the back seat, already imagining how much he would ask for yesterday's coffee truck. But the conversation started completely differently than he had expected. The tall passenger turned halfway toward him and showed him the badge of the Yekaterinburg Organized Crime Control Department. All the buzz left Nikolai's head in an instant. He realized that someone had turned them in. Meanwhile, the officer began to present strange things in a menacing voice, calling Nikolai by a different last name. And then Nekrasov began to realize that he had been mistaken for someone else. You took out a loan from Home Credit Bank and haven't paid for half a year. This qualifies as an economic crime and I can make it so that you are prosecuted for fraud. The RUBOP officer was clearly trying to scare him. Most likely, the owner of the apartment stopped paying the loan and the bank hired the top scorer from among law enforcement agencies. Hey boss. Nikolai even cheered up a bit, getting ready to calmly point out the Oper's mistake and part ways peacefully. I don't know anything about it, Kolya, and I don't know your guy at all. I'm just renting this place, came here on business, and I don't have any money in the bank. He didn't have time to finish speaking before the officer hit him hard on the nose. In the past, the methods used by collectors were almost no different from the methods used by gangsters. They decided that Nikolai was lying to them, and it was time to deal with him. From the shock, Nekrasov's eyes bulged, his nose bloody and swollen. He stared at the collector. Either you give the money now, or we go to the station, process you, and put you in a cell. The man raised his hand to strike again, but Nikolai, enraged, pulled out his Tokarev pistol. There were times when he shot at people for less serious insults. The shot rang out loudly in the enclosed space of the car. The collector slumped into the seat, not having time to understand what had happened. He was dead. The driver, terrified by what he saw, jumped out of the car and zigzagging ran away toward the houses. Nikolai, realizing what he had done, rushed into the apartment. Farid, get up, the cops are here, we need to leave. Like a madman, he shook the boss by the shoulders until he opened his red, bleary hangover eyes. What are you talking about? What cops? Farid couldn't understand anything until Nikolai incoherently told him what had happened. Called the guys, let them pick us up, and I'll gather the guns for now. Farid realized that at any minute the police could arrive here and then nothing would save them. But the accomplices weren't answering their phones, obviously having had a good rest after a successful job. Loaded down with heavy bags of weapons and ammunition, Nikolai and Farid left the apartment and ran as far away from the crime scene as possible. But after half an hour, they were completely exhausted and, trying to save their lives, threw everything into the snow near the parking lot. An hour later, a neighbor who went out to walk her dog discovered a parked car and inside it a body. She called the police and said that some suspicious guys lived in the apartment one floor below. They would come and go, sometimes arriving with things, drinking and often arguing. The detectives went to that apartment and to their surprise found a lot of physical evidence. In their haste, the bandits left behind not only powerful explosives, grenades and ammunition, but also a notebook with the nicknames and contacts of their accomplices. They even found a passport in the name of Nikolai Nekrasov, a native of the city of Tyumen. You could only dream of such luck. Meanwhile, a frightened driver appeared at the police station, who had been hiding for 2 hours in the basement of a neighboring house. Afraid that Nikolai would deal with him too, he told them that they had come together to the debtor. His partner had identification cards with him, which he kept after being dismissed from the authorities in a harsh manner. Trying to intimidate the debtor, he started beating him right in the car, but the debtor took out a gun and shot his partner. After making a request to the Tyumen Main Directorate of Internal Affairs, the investigators from Yekaterinburg realized that they had accidentally caught the leaders of a gang that had been terrorizing 2 entire regions since 1995. All the forces of the Ministry of Internal Affairs were urgently mobilized. Patrols with wanted posters were driving around the city and total vehicle checks began on the roads. And in one of the cars stopped at a checkpoint, the inspectors noticed a man who matched the description. He was not alone. In the back seat, there was a woman of strange appearance. Special forces fighters surrounded the car. Slowly, with their hands raised, Farid Davlyatchin and Nikolai Nekrasov, disguised as a woman, got out of the car. This time, conspiracy didn't help the criminals. During the interrogations, Farid remained calm and confident, but he flatly refused to cooperate with the investigation. He didn't betray any of his accomplices and didn't take responsibility for a single crime. Nikolai, on the other hand, cooperated with the investigation, naming only Farid as the sole organizer of the criminal group. He also gave up the corrupt officer Fomintsev, who helped the gang with tips and organizing the sale of stolen goods. Employees of the Yekaterinburg and Tyumen main departments of internal affairs jointly carried out several complex operations to capture the remaining members of the gang. The cunning Sergei Fomintsev himself was not caught by the officers in time. It was as if he vanished into thin air. He still hasn't been caught. But in Fomintsev's garage, they found a whole arsenal: Kalashnikov assault rifles, Tokarev pistol and Makarov pistols, a German-made MAC machine pistol, and rocket-propelled Grenade 18 anti-tank grenade launcher, and a Muka. A lot of ammunition, grenades, explosives and explosive devices, as well as plenty of military gear and even a night vision device. Farid Davlyatchin, as the organizer of the criminal group, received 23 years in a high-security prison. The other gang members received sentences ranging from 7 to 22 years of imprisonment to be served in a high-security penal colony. The criminal case against Davlyatchin's gang consisted of 116 volumes, and the indictment was read in court over 4 days. The sentence affected 10 criminals, although their accomplices should have been alongside the gang members. Those who provided information about the movements of the cash couriers and safes with money, those who agreed to accept stolen property, and those who hid the stolen vehicles. Those who knew, or at least suspected, but kept silent, thinking it wasn't their business. But some of the criminals who weren't caught at the time managed to avoid justice for a long time. Viktor Rudnik was caught in 2006 and sentenced to 15 years in prison. And Andrei Uzmanov was only caught by the police in the summer of 2020. He was found in the Moscow region.